This is a shir on Likutei Sichos Chelek of Beis, the 22nd book, the parsha of Tzav, the first sicha. Says the Rabbi about the Eish Hama'aracha, about the fire that was on the Mizbeach. So it says that it was crouching like a lion. So the Gemara says Mesechta Yuma. So the Zohar comments on that. It's the Zohar in this week's parsha of Tzav, that this is a reference to Malach Uriel, the Malach whose name is Uriel, who is revealed, who shows himself in this form, the form of a crouching lion. And regarding this, the Zohar says two expressions. First, it says that is chazi, it appears kechezu dechad aryeh takifu, with the appearance, with the resemblance of a strong lion, Revia al tarfe, crouching on its prey, P-R-E-Y. And then the Zohar continues and says, V'ischazi ka'ari ravrivo, and it appears like a big lion, Revia al karbana, crouching on its offering, al karbana, on the sacrifice, on the offering. So here we have two different expressions. And it says the Rabbi, that my father, in his comments on the Zohar, refers to the distinction here of the two different Lashonis. First of all, the first expression the Zohar uses is a strong lion. In the second expression, it says a big lion. Number two, in the first expression, so that's Takifa, Aryeh Takifa, in the first expression, strong lion. And the second says Aryeh Ravrafa, which means big lion. Second distinction is, in the first expression, it says Revia al tarfe, that it's crouching over its prey, the thing that it's caught. And then afterwards, in the second expression, it says Revia al karbana, it's crouching on its karban, its offering. And says the Rebbe, my father explains that when we're talking about what is the Aryeh, what is the concept of the lion, this is a reference to the lion on the holy supernal chariot, as it's described in the vision of Yecheskel. And there are two concepts there. There's chesed and gvura, kindness and strictness. Because on the one hand, the word aryeh has a numerical value. Gvura, aryeh, the word lion in Hebrew, has the same numerical value as strength, strictness. On the other hand, the face of the lion in its placing on the holy supernal chariot of Hashem is to the right side. The right is chesed. So you have the lion depicting, on the one hand, Gevura, on the other hand, its placement is in a place of chesed. Strictness and kindness are both incorporated within this concept of Aryeh, of lion. And this, says the Rebbe's father, is the expression in the different expressions of the Zohar. First, the Zohar is speaking about the strength of the lion, the Gevura of the lion. And that's why he first speaks about the strong lion that's crouching on its prey. So first of all, speaking about the strength of the lion, and then also speaking about its prey. In other words, when something is caught and becomes the prey of the one who is a predator, it's coming from Gevur, it's coming from strength and strictness. Then the next thing that the Zohar speaks about is the Ari, the way the Ari is in a form of chesed. And that's why it speaks about, as we said, right, there's an aspect of kindness in the placement of the supernal, of the Aryeh, of the lion in the supernal throne. It speaks about Aryeh Ravrava, the strong lion, the big lion, Revia al Karbana, that's crouching on its carbon, on its offering. So Ravrava is an expression that refers to chesed, big. So we know that in the verse that it says, to you Hashem l'cha havai agdul v'agvura, to you Hashem there is gedula and gevura, there is greatness and there is strictness. The word gedula is a reference to chesed as being the first attribute. And also when we talk about karbana, the word karbana, while it means sacrifice, but it comes from the expression of offering, of bringing near. So when you talk about bringing near, the animal that's brought near before Hashem, that's an expression of yamin, of the right side, of chesed, of kindness. And as we know that it says, yamin mekareves, the way one must always approach somebody else is with the right hand, one brings near. So right is connected with chesed, which is connected with karban, with bringing near. So the Zohar speaks about the two aspects of the lion, the Gevura and the Chesed. base. As we have spoken numerous times, says the Rebbe, the notes that my father wrote were written in concise and terse fashion. I mean, the Rebbe doesn't point this out in the right here, but the Rebbe explained to us at length. The history of it is that his mother, Rebbe Tzimchana, brought the books, the few books she was able to bring for the Rebbe's father, one of them being Zohar, and the Rebbe's father didn't have paper on which to write his notes. He wrote them in the margins of the book, so he had to write very briefly. And the things that need to be learned from what he has written, he doesn't explain. He anticipates that whoever's going to learn it will understand it on their own. Of course, the Rebbe explained every week. The Rebbe would explain in the Fabrengen for many years what's to be learned from the shorthand notes that his father wrote in the margins of his books. So learning this note that the Rebbe's father says, we have a question in the actual language of the Zohar. Since a lion, this very lion, has both concepts, both chesed and gvura, both kindness and strictness, why does the Zohar divide the two descriptions into two separate passages? He speaks first about the strong lion who's crouching on his prey, and then the big lion that's crouching on the thing that's been brought near, on the offering. Why doesn't he just say both interspersed into one passage? So it could have written as follows. Could have said, Arya tekifa v'ravrava, a lion that's strong and big, Revia al tarfe al karbana, crouching on its prey on the offering that was brought to it, or something similar to that. Incorporate both in one passage rather than having two separate passages. Because even though, yes, granted, you will say that chesed and gvura are two opposite, mutually exclusive concepts. So how could you blend them into one? But what my father is saying in the notes, says the Rebbe, is that the concept of the lion does incorporate within itself. It does have both aspects. And they're not two separate, different, mutually exclusive concepts. They both coexist in that same lion. And it's therefore like what? It's like Oir HaGevura B'Kli HaChesed. It's like a concept of the light of strictness in the vessel of kindness. In other words, when it comes to the midos, when it comes to the attributes, the emotional attributes, the way they express themselves, there's gradients and blends of various midos. And sometimes you have the exterior which comes out as chesed, but really it's the oir hagvura, it's the strength which is within it. I'll give you an example of the opposite of the oir hachesed bikli hagvura. I think this will be an example. Imagine a very kind, benevolent parent is strict to their child because he's playing with matches. So that would be the reverse. That would be the strictness. That would be an external, the vehicle, the expression, the outward expression would be gevura, but the inward expression is, of course, kindness. Here, the Rebbe says that in this would be, the lion would be the light of gevura in the vehicle, in the vessel of chesed. In other words, both of them could be coexistent within, and they do. They are represented by the general inyan of the lion. The gematria of Ari on the one hand is gevura, strictness. And we know you don't have to go to gematria actually. The very character trait of lion is giber kari, strong lion. There's strength there. There's right. You got to be scared of a lion. And at the same time, we say that the face of the lion is Elayamin, is facing in Hashem's holy chariot, is facing to the right. So there's an aspect of kindness there. And similarly, it is when we talk about the expression of karbanis. Karbanis in general. In the Zohar, they're called two things. The karbanos on the one hand are called like prey, which is gevura, something that depicts strictness and strength. It's had to be overcome. It became the prey of the one who caught it. On the other hand, we're talking about the thing that was brought near. That's chesed, that's kindness. So actually every korban, every sacrifice has both aspects, gevura and chesed. Why? Because the offering up of the sacrifice on the Mizbeach is by very definition an ascent. You're uplifting the physical animals from below to above, being burnt up in fire. That's gevura. That's the concept of strength and strictness. Gevura is an upward motion. And that then achieves and affects Hashem's pleasure. pleasure is Hashem beaming down, so to speak. Nachas ruach lefanai, his pleasure that his will was done. Hashem beaming down his pleasure from above below. This is chesed. Chesed is a downward flow. We know that chesed is water. Water flows downwards. We know that fire, gevura, is fire. Fire yearns upwards. So every carbon has both aspects. The carbon is going up, but what's being elicited, what's coming down, is Hashem's delight and Hashem's pleasure. And we could say even more than this, says the Rebbe, that both these aspects are in the same aspect of the carbon. The coming close to Hashem is actually done in a way that it leaves something over to be attached down below. First of all, there's this thing that the owners or the koyanim eat. So it's brought up at the same time. Part of it remains down. It says the Rebbe in the brackets, even if you talk about the burnt offering, which has to be totally burnt to Hashem. So what's left down below here for the owners or for the kohen to eat? But we know that this skin, the hide of the animal, went to the kohen who offered it up. And even when we're talking about a carbon that doesn't come from the animal life, but it comes from flour, like a carbon mincha, the meal offering of a kohen. And when a kohen, unlike when a regular Jew brings a meal offering, some of it gets eaten by the kohen. When a kohen brings a meal offering, it gets fully burnt on the mizbeach. But the concept of a carbon, what's happening through this carbon? Either there's few kinds of meal offerings of a kohen. Either it's to inaugurate him into the service of the Beis Hamikdash, so then something is happening for him down here as well, something good. Or it's an atonement because he can't afford. In some instances, there's a sliding scale of the karbonis that's brought, and when he cannot afford to bring an animal, he will bring a meal offering. And if it's a kohen bringing the meal offering, it's going to be fully burnt before Hashem. So he's getting a benefit from it. It's not fully upward. There's something happening down below here for him as well. Similarly, when we say that Hashem has a downward flow that's elicited through the carbon because there's a pleasure that's created by him for doing what he wanted, this kiruv and chesed that Hashem has, this nearness that Hashem beams down, so to speak, to the one who's offered the sacrifice, is connected with what? Why does he elicit that delight, that pleasure from Hashem? Because I have done, to paraphrase what our sages say, because Hashem says, I have said, and my wish has been done. In other words, there's been obedience, there's been subservience, bittul. That's gvura. And that expresses itself whenever a mitzvah is done. That's connected with gvura. And by the way, every mitzvah is connected with strictness and exactness, because every mitzvah has its limitations, according to what the Torah instructs. You can't just say I have an outpouring of love to Hashem, I have chesed, I'll do whatever I want. The mitzvah has to be to hear what Hashem wants. So there's a gvura aspect in that as well. So in other words, yes, there's two conflicting things, chesed and gvura, but in the concept of a carbon, they both come together. So according to this, the Zohar could have and should have said both things together. Why does he make two passages of this concept of the lion? Why does he speak about the strong lion, gevura, and then about the big lion, chesed? Why doesn't he just interpolate it into one? Gimel, third chapter here, so we can say that the explanation is as follows. Even though in this lion we have both concepts, both chesed, kindness, and gevura, strictness, together they coexist. However, there's a difference in the way they are revealed. Sometimes the gevura, the strictness, comes out as the revealed aspect, and the kindness is concealed. And sometimes it's the reverse. And that's why the Zohar divides this up into two different cases, the two passages. Speaks about the strong lion that's crouching on its prey. When it refers to it as strong, crouching on prey, it's talking about the level of lion when the aspect of gevura, of strictness, is revealed, and the aspect of chesed is concealed. And then when he speaks about the big lion that's crouching on the offering, which is a chesed aspect, he's talking about the level of lion when what's revealed is chesed, kindness, and the aspect of gevura, the aspect of strictness, is concealed. But we have to understand what is the difference. Where does this difference become expressed? What causes this difference? When will it be this way? When will it be that way? Whether When will the Gevura or the Chesed respectively be the revealed ones? So let's first understand there's something else that was introduced by the Zohar. When the Zohar we discussed the two passages one after the other, the strong lion and the big lion, but there was something in between those two passages. Before the Zohar speaks about that second passage about the big lion that's crouching on its carbon, first he prefaces two things. A, that this is like the parable analogy of a king who has been sent a present, and he liked the present. So then he calls his servant and says, go and take the present and bring it to me. Similarly, Hashem says to Uriel, his angel, go and receive that present that my children are offering before me. Number two, said the Zohar, this is what is stated in the Torah on the 8th day of the consecration of the Mishkan. It says, "Vateitze eish milifnei Hashem," a fire went out from before Hashem, "Vatoichal al hamizbeach," and consumed on the altar sa'ila, the burnt offering. The Zohar says this is a reference to Uriel. This is a reference to the angel Uriel. The Nachis bechezu, the Eshel, comes down in the appearance of a fire, the Kabbalah, Dareina, to receive the gift. And about this the Zohar says, "V'schazia ka'ari ravrava revi al karbani," and it appears, this Malach Uriel, the Malach that comes down in fire, appears like a big lion who is crouching on the offering. So before he moves into Chesed, into the big lion, first there was an introduction of the concept of this mashal. According to this, we could say that in the Inyan of Uriel, which comes down in the form of the lion that eats the sacrifices, there's two aspects. There's Aleph, the way he is in and of himself. We're there mostly, we're talking about the strength of a lion, strong lion that's crouching on its prey. And then there's the second aspect, which is the way Hashem says to Uriel, go and get my gift. When there's an instruction, and therefore whenever Hashem instructs, there's also a power given, the ability given from above to be able to receive the karbonos, the sacrifices, and this becomes achieved through the fact that the person is highlighting that he's bringing a doiroin, a gift. As we said, Hashem, this is the analogy of somebody who brings a gift to Hashem. So there's the aspect here of this carbon representing a gift, as we're going to explain what is the uniqueness of calling a carbon a gift as opposed to a regular sacrifice. Then once a gift has been brought and Hashem speaks and sends down the angel, then we have strictness, gevuros, that turn into chasadim, turn into kindness. And that's why the concept of chesed is then in a revealed state. And that's why the Zohar connects this specifically with the verse that says, "Vateitze eish milifnei Hashem," that the fire went out from before Hashem. Because this pasuk, which says that the fire went out, was on the 8th day of the miluyim, of the consecration. And the difference in the fire that came down as a big lion, rather than a strong lion. And why does it come down like a big lion? Because we have an instruction that Hashem tells Uriel to come get the gift. It's like the difference between the 8th day of the consecration to the other 7 days of consecration. What's the difference? Hey, so let's talk about the difference between the 7 days and the 8th day. We spoke many times, says the Rebbe at length, what our sages tell us, that all the 7 days, after they finished the Mishkan, it was brought to Moshe. Moshe erected it, and for 7 days, Moshe erected the Mishkan, and he brought all the sacrifices, but the Shekhinah did not rest there. Well, we have to understand, since also in the 7 days of consecration, they offered up the karbonos, the sacrifices, and about the sacrifices, we know it says that they become they are a sweet-smelling fragrance to Hashem. In other words, Hashem has nachas because His wish is being done. So how can we say that there was no Shekhinah resting in the Mishkan? By bringing the karbonos, automatically it elicits the nachas of Hashem, which means the Shekhinah is residing. And the answer for this is that when we talk about the residing, the resting of the Shekhinah, there's a few levels. In general, it expresses and divides into two distinct levels. There's the level where the revelation of the Shekhinah comes because of what has been elicited by the service of the created being, and therefore it's commensurate also with what he has done. But then it's limited to the Seder Hishtalshlus, to the order of descent that Hashem has created for the purpose of the finite worlds. because the created being can only reach to its source, can reach only to his tippy toes and get to his source, as a Chassidus calls it. It's the arousal from above that becomes elicited and drawn down through the arousal from below, and therefore it's also defined and measured by it. It's limited by the fact that it's being elicited by created beings. It can only go and elicit from as far as the source of limitation is. Then the next thing is, we can talk about the resting of the Shekhinah that comes from above, from higher than the chain of descent into the finite world, and that is higher than what is done by the and can be elicited by the created beings. This is referred to in the Lashon of Chassidus, Isarusa de le'ela mitzad atzmo, the arousal from above that is self-starting, that comes from itself. And this is the difference between the 7 days of consecration, this 8th day of consecration. The erection, the putting up of the Mishkan, which was in the 7 days of the consecration, was the preparation and the service from Matov, from the created, the lower being, to create a revelation of Hashem's presence in the Mishkan. That Avodah, which was done from below, drew down and elicited a revelation of the Shekhinah from the level of Ishtalshlus, and that's why it was expressed in the 7 days of consecration. Remember, 7 corresponds to 7 days of building, of creation, the Ishtalshlus. However, that's not the case when we talk about the 8th day of the consecration. There we're talking about the revelation of the Shekhinah from above, self-initiated. Hashem, the glory of Hashem appeared, and a fire went out from before Hashem from the level of 8, which is higher than Ishtalshlus, higher than the limited, in other words, chain of descent into this world. There's 8. 8 is from above. It's not 8 is not 7, the first day of the second cycle of 7. 8 is way above. It's something from above Ishtalshlus. So if that's the case, we have Bateitze Eish, Hashem self-initiates, so to speak, this Gilui. But no. Says the Rabbi in Eisvav in chapter 6, even though that the 8th level is higher than the created beings, higher than Ishtalshlus, and therefore higher than the service of man, that man can reach through service, nonetheless, in order that all of the revelations from above shouldn't be in a way that's termed in the Zohar Naham Modichisuf, a bread of shame, in other words, a free handout. That's why what has been injected into creation, into Hashem's world, is that all of Hashem's drawing downs, the Hamshachis, all the things that are drawn down from Hashem, come through, or at least through the preface of Avodah, of the service of man. Because if something comes totally uninitiated, totally undeserved, totally unprepared for, from us, then it's a free handout, it's something that is not appreciated, it's something that ultimately is shameful. It's not earned. And when we talk about this inyan, before there was the drawing down of Hashem's Shekhinah, the resting of the Shekhinah on the 8th day of the consecration, there needed to be in the very 8 days, in the 8th day itself, the Korban of Aaron. And through this the Shekhinah came down. In other words, it wasn't just, Ha'ara 27, not just that there was 7 days of preparation, which created the setup for then Hashem initiating the 8th day of revelation, but even on the 8th day there was also something that needed to be done. Something that somehow at least alluded to what was needed to be achieved, which is the drawing down of something that we can't draw down. How do you do that? So just a note. Asar Shlim, there's a concept that sometimes you need to create the setup and then the thing happens self-initiated. So let's say, for example, the king's not going to come into the room until everybody's perfectly quiet. Everybody being perfectly quiet is not what brings the kings in. But everybody being perfectly quiet is a prerequisite. Without that, the king won't come. When the king comes, he's self-initiated. He's come because he wants to come. That's not just that here. Here we're saying there's also something that's being done, so it shouldn't be totally without context of the Avodah, the service of us down below. Hashem was waiting for something to be done on the 8th day, which was similar to what was trying to be done to elicit Hashem in an uninitiated way. However, since we're talking about, we're continuing back in the inside, of course we're talking about the resting of the Shekhinah, which is higher than the realm of the created being. So we understand that there's a difference in the content of what's being done, and there has to be something different being done on the 8th day, which is bringing down this level of Shekhinah to reside. And it's going to be contrasted and different than the level than what was done for the regular 7 days, which only was able to bring down the light of Hashem connected to Ishtalshus, connected to the chain of descent of creation of the world. Zayin. So let's first understand by prefacing what we find, that notwithstanding the fact that in the 7 days of the consecration, Aaron brought every day a par echad, a one ox, a one cow, to forgive for the deed of the egel, of the golden calf, the calf being a small cow. Nonetheless, on the 8th day, he once again brought an egel ben bakal chatas. He brought a calf in order to be a guilt offering, in order to be an atonement offering. And this was in order to make it known by bringing something that was offensive in a sense, because reminiscent of the golden calf, which was a sin. By bringing it as a sacrifice, this would make it known that Hashem had forgiven him through the bringing this calf on the sin of the calf which he had made. So why did we have to bring another korban on the 8th day to make it be known that Hashem is forgiving him through this egel? So we could say that the intention of this kapara, of this atonement, is not atonement for his soul, in other words, to try and get forgiveness. But it's lechaper lifnei Hashem, as the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, to atone before Hashem, in other words, to restore the relationship, li'asnachas ruach lekenet, to be in a state of delight and of nachas, of pleasure before Hashem, of pleasure before his maker, for Hashem. In other words, to restore the amicable, to restore the lovingness of the relationship. Not just to clean up the spilled milk, but to restore the relationship of lovingness between Hashem and Aaron, Hashem and the Jewish people, that had existed before the sin of the egel. And the karbanis of the 7 days of consecration, they created a drawing down of Hashem's light from Ishtalshlus, which is in the realm of created beings. That had to do with kaparas nafshe shel adam. That had to do with the atonement of the soul. In other words, the forgiving, the cleansing of the sin. It should be in a complete way, which is not the case when the korban that was brought on the 8th day, which that had to elicit the revelation that's self-initiated from above, from a light that's higher than Ishtalshlus. So the korban is brought on the 8th day. They had a different content. They weren't coming to clean up. They were coming to bring a gift, to restore the sweet relationship, a nachas ruach lekoinai, a pleasure to his master, which would be eliciting something that cannot be elicited. It can only be hinted at. It can only come as a gift. You say if it's a gift, so what can you do to possibly elicit it? There is a saying in Chazal that even when something is given gratuitously, it's given as a gratuity, as a free gift. If something nice wasn't done to the giver, the recipient would not have been the beneficiary of this gift. It's a gift, it's not payment, but there had to be some kind of a setup, a scenario, a pleasantness created by the recipient so that the giver would give this free gift. And this is what's happening here. On the 8th day, says the Rebbe, the korbanos are taking on a notion not of atonement. That was done the 7 days. And that was enough to draw down the light that's connected to Ishtalshlus. Here, there's a restoration of the nachas ruach. He's bringing a korban just to be a gift, not to draw down something. But what that does is it announces lahidiyah. It announces that Hashem forgives. Not like by the 7 days of creation where it's about achieving forgiveness, because here it's about letting it be known. In other words, the belovedness. That Aaron achieves a state of belovedness, the Jewish people achieve a state of belovedness before Hashem as they were before. And that's why there needs to be, to achieve that lovingness, it's all about not just technically cleaning up the sin, but also letting it be known and revealing that Hashem has forgiven, and there's a restoration of that loving relationship again. Ches, according to all this, we'll understand why the Zohar divides us into two things. Why it speaks about the two passages of the lion, the Chesed aspect, the Vura aspect, and doesn't just integrate both into one passage. We're talking about the fire from above, which is like the lion, which comes from the service of the karbanis in general. So from the level of ishtalshlus, from the level of the drawing down, which is a revealed light, which is a limited light, that's mainly tzimtzum. That's the strong lion that's on its prey. That's the regular karbanas that touch and elicit the light from ishtalshlus. However, once we talk about the next stage, which is the karbanas that are like a gift to Hashem, they create the nachas, like on the 8th day, then there's a drawing down of Hashem's light from higher than ishtalshlus. There Hashem says to Uriel, go and get the gift for me, which is like, the Zohar says, it's like the fire that comes out from before Hashem on the 8th day of Miluim. That's a different level. Can't just join the two. And then becomes the gevuris, the strictness becomes transformed to chasodim, to kindness. And that's why it looks like, this is what the Zohar says, the big lion that's crouching on its carbon, on the offering, there what comes out in a revealed way is chasodim, is the kindness dafka. Yeah.